Welcome to Reading Bear. Today we've got a story where OP's 100-year-old oak tree sparks a full-on neighbor feud with a Karen who thinks rules don't apply to her. I always figured the old oak would outlast me. It was the first thing you saw when you turned down my street. Big crown, wide shade over my driveway, and a trunk so thick I couldn't reach halfway around it. Every season it did what it always did. Spring buds, deep green summer shade, crunchy leaves that I mulched into the grass. Squirrels used it like a highway. Kids posed under it for first day of school pictures. An arborist had once guessed it was around a century old, healthy as they come. I believed him. Then a neighbor moved in next door who hated anything that wasn't new and shiny and exactly the way she wanted it. I didn't meet her right away. I heard her before I saw her. She complained to the mover about the slope of her lawn and how someone should fix the way leaves blew onto her side. Someone didn't take long to become me. The first time we talked, she stood at the property line with her hands on her hips and looked straight up at my oak like it had personally attacked her. She had a list: shade on her kitchen, leaves in her gutters, acorns on her patio, birds on her patio furniture. It read like a ransom note for the outdoor world. The punchline came 10 minutes in. Cut it down. I told her I wasn't cutting down a healthy, protected tree that was fully on my property. I said I'd pay for gutter guards. I'd rake the leaves that landed on her side if that made her feel better. I'd split the cost of a proper crown lift with a certified arborist so the lowest branches didn't sweep her roof. I said all of it calmly because I knew how these conversations go. She didn't want solutions. She wanted the world to rearrange itself. She answered with the first of many lines I would hear. "Then I'll make you." That kicked off a run of complaints to the city. She called code enforcement so often I got to know the inspector by first name. He'd show up, sigh, and make the same notes. The oak was healthy. It was not dangerous. It wasn't touching power lines. It was a heritage tree under a local ordinance, which meant any major pruning or removal needed a permit. He sent us both the text of the rule and closed each complaint file with no violation. After the third visit, he also sent a form letter that explained our trimming rights. A neighbor can trim branches up to the property line, but only if the trimming doesn't harm the tree, and removal requires a permit. It was simple and very clear. I printed 2 copies. I taped one inside my garage and stuck the other on my fridge because I knew I'd need the exact wording. Over the next few weeks, she accelerated. She brought up imaginary leaf finds the city didn't have. She left notes telling me to bag every leaf that fell within an hour. She even told a contractor installing her patio cover that my tree wasn't actually mine because the branches were on her side. He looked embarrassed when I walked out with the survey and showed him the pins in each corner. The trunk was well inside my line. Branches don't move boundaries. He apologized and kept his ladder off my fence. I could have ignored her after that and just lived my life. But that's not how people like her operate. They escalate until you either snap or they finally hit something they can't push through. I don't snap easily, and I have a boring superpower. I read directions and follow them exactly. The certified letter arrived on a Thursday. Return address was her name, but the body looked like it came from a template. It said I had 14 days to abate the nuisance caused by encroaching branches and debris. If I didn't cut the overhanging branches, she would hire a contractor to perform necessary removal and bill me under applicable municipal code. She even pasted a paragraph from the inspection letter, except she ignored the part that said you can only trim to the property line and you cannot harm the tree. I stood at my kitchen counter and read it 3 times. Then I got to work. Malicious compliance is about doing exactly what someone asked for, exactly how the rules say to do it, even if they never meant it that way. She wanted me to abate? Fine. The letter from the inspector said a neighbor can trim up to the property line as long as the tree isn't harmed and the work is done properly. I called the same ISA-certified arborist who'd looked at my oak before. He came out, inspected the crown, and said the same thing he'd said last time. Healthy tree. Normal seasonal leaf drop. Nothing hazardous. He said a limited crown lift could help clear her new patio cover and keep branches 5 feet off her roof. He also said if someone tried to hack it aggressively on one side, you could destabilize the canopy and risk failure. He put that in writing. I asked him for 2 more things: a formal valuation of the tree and stakes to mark the property line under the drip edge. He smiled when I asked about valuation. "I don't get asked that until something goes wrong," he said. "But sure." A week later, he came back with a written report using the standard method, the one city staff use when a protected tree gets damaged. He measured the trunk diameter at breast height, looked at species, condition, and location, and plugged it into the formula. Replacement cost for a tree like that, In that location, with that condition rating, came out to $95,000. He explained it wasn't the lumber value. It was the appraised value of the living landscape asset, which made sense when you consider the size and benefits of a mature tree. He said if the city had to fine for removing it without a permit, they look at that report. I made a folder. I put in the inspector's letter, the arborist's valuation, the crown lift proposal, photos of the trunk relative to the survey pins, and pictures of the property line with little bright flags directly under the edges. I kept adding things. I printed a short letter in reply to hers, attached the arborist's proposal, and said I planned to complete a limited crown lift by a licensed arborist within the time she demanded. I also pasted the part of the code she had skipped and highlighted it. I told her plainly that removal or any cutting beyond the property line required a permit, and I did not consent to removal. Then I did one more thing. I went to the hardware store and bought 2 signs. The first was a simple "No Trespassing" sign. The second was specific to trees, bright red, with a warning that the tree was protected under city ordinance and removal required a permit. I zip-tied them to the fence right next to the trunk, facing her side. I also wrapped a strip of high-visibility survey tape around the trunk like a sash and took pictures with a date stamp. It felt over the top. It also felt like exactly the level of documentation I would want if something went sideways. Day 14 came and went. The arborist's crew scheduled the crown lift for the following week. I slid a note under her door with the date and time, and a reminder that they were only trimming on my side and a little over the line, well within the rule, to preserve the structure of the tree. I figured she'd fume, but let it go. Instead, 2 days before my crew was due, she hired her own. I know because I came home at lunch to grab something I forgot and saw a beat-up truck idling at the curb, no company name on the doors. 2 guys in sneakers and torn jeans, no helmets, untied ladders, a chainsaw that sounded like it hadn't seen oil in months, no permits posted, no certified arborist license on display like legit companies do. One guy was already on her roof with a rope around a limb. The other had the saw in his hands and his foot on my fence. I told them to stop. I said they weren't allowed on my property. I pointed at the signs, the tape, the flags marking the property line. I explained the permit requirement. The guy with the saw shrugged and said, "She said take it down." He pointed to her patio door. She was there with her arms folded, enjoying the show. I called the non-emergency line and asked for a code officer. I also called the arborist. He answered and said he would head over and not to get in the way of anyone with a saw. Good advice. I went inside and started my camera pointing at the fence from the upstairs window. I didn't want to post anything. I wanted a record. The code officer arrived fast, but not fast enough. By the time his car turned onto the street, one major limb was already on the ground. It hung across the flags and landed deep on my side, crushing a section of my hydrangeas and chewing up the edge of the lawn. The guy with the saw hopped the fence without asking, still holding the saw. The officer blew his horn. Everyone froze like someone had paused a movie. He walked up and asked the obvious questions. Did anyone have a permit? No. Was a certified arborist on site? No. Was the trunk on my property? Yes. He took photos of the signs, the tape, the flags, the letter I handed him, and the chunk of limb lying across everything. He told them to stop all work. She stormed out and started in on him about leaves and rights and sunshine. He kept his voice calm and said the rules were not complicated. Trim to the line without harming the tree. Removal requires a permit, and you cannot trespass to cut on the other side. That should have been the end of it. A warning, a fine, maybe a stern letter. What happened next is the part I still replay. She waited until the code officer left to write up his report. The truck left with him. I breathed out and figured we'd resume this with paperwork. I grabbed a late lunch and went back to work. I came home that evening to a stump, not just a cut, everything. They had come back after the officer left and did the whole thing in one illegal push. Clean fell, flush cut. The stump was leveled down and raked over with wood chips like a bad magic trick. Sawdust was all over the driveway. The hydrangeas were buried. My fence had fresh scrapes from a rope. The crown that gave shade over half the yard for as long as I'd been there was gone. In its place was a round, raw plate in the ground and the kind of silence you notice when something that was always there isn't. I stood looking at it for a while. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was the kind of tired you feel when someone breaks a rule you went out of your way to make clear. Then I opened the folder. First call was the police. I wasn't interested in a fight in the driveway. I wanted an incident number for timber, trespass, and criminal mischief. The officer came, took photos, and then walked to her patio door. She didn't open it. He left a card with a report number. Second call was to the same code officer. He showed up again, saw the stump, and his face went hard. He took more photos, measured the stump, and wrote one of those violation forms on a triplicate pad I had never seen before. I remember the way his pen dug into the paper when he wrote, "Unauthorized removal of heritage tree." Third call was to the arborist. He arrived with a measuring tape and a clipboard, crouched by the stump, and measured the diameter the way it's standard to do. He explained he could still produce a valuation using the stump and the photos he took earlier. He also said the cut was sloppy and too low, which removed the natural barrier against rot. Sloppy, on purpose, and illegal. Fourth call was to my insurance, who told me what I already knew. They don't pay for someone else's intentional act, but they were happy to subrogate if I recovered anything, and they paid for the damaged fence and plantings. I emailed her a copy of the police report number and the code violation notice. I also attached the valuation I'd gotten approved the week before, the one that pegged the tree's value at $95,000, and reminded her that the city could also fine for the permit issue. I expected a lawyer to reply. Instead, she sent me a one-liner. "You're welcome." That was useful. So were the texts I got later from the guy with the chainsaw. He messaged me through a social app because he wanted me to know he wasn't trying to cause trouble and to ask if I would leave him out of it. He said she had told them the tree was on the line and city said it was okay, and that she'd cover everything. He sent me a photo of the cash she paid them. There was no company and no insurance. It was two guys and a saw. He also sent me a photo of her patio text that said, "Take it all. I don't care about permits." He had no reason to lie. He wanted out of a mess. I added those screenshots to the folder. The next morning, I dropped off a demand letter at her place and mailed a copy through certified mail. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from me, and it did exactly what she had done to me. It quoted the exact rule she liked to paste at me and the part she always cut off. It attached the valuation. It attached the inspection notes, the flags, the photos of the signs, the text from her hired saw guy, and the code violation notice. It demanded $95,000 for the value of the tree, plus the cost to grind the stump, repair the fence, and replace the crushed plantings. It said if she didn't pay within a reasonable time, I would pursue civil remedies under the state timber trespass law, which allows up to triple damages if the act is willful. Her response was predictable. First, she slid my letter back under my mat with LOL written on it in pen. Then she went online and posted in the neighborhood group calling me a bully who valued a tree more than a neighbor. People love a tree. That didn't go the way she thought it would. A bunch of folks told her the rule about heritage trees and asked why she didn't file for a permit. One neighbor, who has a kid with asthma, said the oak helped shade their house in summer. The group mod shut comments after it turned into a mess. I hired a lawyer. I'm not the lawsuit type, but sometimes the straightest line is the court calendar. The lawyer took one look at my folder and told me I'd done more than half his job already. He sent a formal demand with the same attachments and gave her a deadline. She sent nothing back. He filed suit. People think court is loud. Most of it is boring. It's emails and scheduling orders and discovery deadlines. But discovery is where the structure of malicious compliance pays off. Everything I had in my folder became more than a story. It became evidence lined up in the order the rule says it should be lined up. The initial letter from the inspector with the city code, my neighbor's certified demand demanding compliance with the code, except the part she didn't like. My written reply agreeing to do a limited crown lift with a licensed arborist within her deadline. The signs, the flags, the measurements, the valuation dated before the cut. The code officer's violation, with photos of the stump and the crushed shrubs. The contractor's messages showing cash payment and the instruction to take it all, the police report, the incident number. Every little detail said the same thing. I followed the rules she waved at me. Exactly. She didn't. Her lawyer tried a few angles. He said the tree was a nuisance. He said leaves counted as damage. He said she had a right to sunlight for her solar panels. He said I failed to maintain the tree and forced her hand. The inspector's notes killed that. He had repeatedly inspected and found the oak healthy. The solar panel claim didn't exist anywhere in the code. And the best part came when her own certified letter was entered into the record. The judge asked where in the code it said she could remove the tree. Her lawyer read the paragraph she had copied in her letter. The judge asked him to keep reading. He had to read the part about only trimming to the line and not harming the tree. The courtroom was quiet, in the way offices are quiet, when someone gets caught skipping the last line of an email, and the last line is the important one. If you've never seen a city code officer testify, you learn they are dry and devastating. He walked through the permit process and how obvious it was what she needed to do if she wanted removal. He said no permit was ever issued. He said he warned her in person. He pointed at his violation notice and the photos of the signs. He identified the "No Trespassing" and "Protected Tree" placards in my photos on my fence facing her yard. He said plainly what this was: unauthorized removal of a protected tree. The arborist testified too. He explained the valuation method in simple terms. Trunk size, species, health, and location combine to give a number that reflects what it would take to replace the benefits and presence of a tree like that. It isn't about lumber. It's about a massive living thing you can't just pop into the ground overnight. He showed the judge how he measured the stump and tied it back to the photos from before. He pointed to the writing in his earlier inspection that warned against aggressive one-sided pruning. It was all polite, steady, and unexciting. It was also a nail gun. I didn't talk much. I answered questions when asked. I told the judge I liked the tree and I'd tried to compromise. I paid for gutter guards on my neighbor's house. I mulched leaves. I hired an arborist. I scheduled a crown lift. I complied with the part of the rule that says a neighbor can trim to the line, and I documented the rest. Then I went to work and came home to a stump. There are two kinds of judgment days. One is dramatic. The other is a signed sheet of paper that changes things. We got the second kind. The court found her liable for timber trespass and unauthorized removal under the ordinance. The judge didn't triple the valuation. He said the ordinance had its own penalty and the evidence was strong, but he would stick to the valuation plus costs and fees, and the city's fine would be separate. He awarded the $95,000 for the tree, full reimbursement for the fence, repair, and plantings, and my attorney's fees. The city issued its own citations with daily penalties until she submitted a replanting plan and paid the administrative fine. She tried to argue again about sunshine. The code officer pointed to a list of replacement requirements: multiple large caliper trees, not shrubs, and proof of planting. She asked for something smaller. They told her the minimum diameters were set in the policy. She said it was unfair that she had to have trees after all this. The moderator in my head locked the thread again. Money like that doesn't come in a lump. Her insurance didn't touch it at first because she had hired unlicensed workers to do illegal work. The guys with the saw had no insurance at all. She appealed. They denied. My lawyer found her assets and recorded the judgment. A lien went on her house. She sold a car. She tried to refinance. Rates weren't kind. She eventually settled on a plan: a big payment up front and monthly payments after. I don't pretend any of that felt good. By then, the stump in my yard had grown a ring of suckers that I had to cut every few weeks. Every time I went out there with the loppers, I saw the patio door next door and remembered the look on her face through the glass when the first limb dropped. The city made her plant 3 replacement trees along her patio and 2 more out front, with proof of purchase, installation, and aftercare. It was the kind of compliance that doesn't give you a viral high. It gives you the steady satisfaction of a rule doing what it's made to do. A couple months later, a crew in clean shirts and helmets showed up at my house, the real arborist, the one I hired and ground out the stump. He and I stood there while the grinder chewed the last of the oak into chips. He said, "It's always the good ones that go like this." I agreed. He asked if I wanted to plant again. I said yes, but not yet. I wanted to sit with the empty space for a while and decide where to put the next thing that would outlast me. Neighbors I'd never met stopped by when they saw the work. A few remembered the tree from when they were kids. One older neighbor said his parents had parked in that shade at a summer block party when he was a teenager. He patted my shoulder and said what a lot of people said: "Good for you for following through." It's a weird compliment, being praised for filling out forms, keeping receipts, and reading the last line of a paragraph. But that's exactly what got us here. If you need the exact malicious compliance part spelled out, it's this. She demanded I comply with the rule. I did, to the letter. I honored the part that said she could trim to the line, and that we had to use proper care. I scheduled a licensed crew. I warned her that removal needed a permit and I would not consent. She then chose to break the exact rule she quoted at me, and because I had built the record around that rule, every single thing she did stacked up against her. Her own words, in her own certified letter, made her act willful. That turned a "he said, she said" into "here's the paragraph you skipped. It's not glamorous, it's not clever. It's just a slow fuse made of paperwork tied to a very expensive bomb she insisted on lighting. She moved a while later. The listing photos were funny. Bright sun on a bare patio where the shade used to land around noon. New trees planted along the fence, but still skinny, a long way from making any difference. The description bragged about low-maintenance landscaping. She didn't brag about being the reason half the block now pays more attention to city tree policies than the sports page. As for me, I took the first payment from the judgment and used part of it to redo the crushed bed along the fence and fix the section where the rope scraped the paint. I saved the rest. On the first spring after the stump grinding, I went to the nursery with the arborist and picked out 2 young oaks and a ginkgo, not saplings. Good, wide containers with real structure and healthy leaders. He planted them in a staggered line where the old crown used to spread. He told me how to water and when to mulch and how to prune lightly so each would develop a strong shape. He set up little slow-release bags at their base. The next morning, I sat on the steps with coffee and watched goldfinches check them out. The yard looked different, smaller in some ways and bigger in others. I took a photo from the spot where I had taken the same photo of the old tree for years. I put it next to the old ones in a frame. I still get annoyed when I think about it. I still catch myself expecting shade that isn't there yet. And I still mow around the spot where the stump was with a little care, like there's something sacred under the grass. I also still keep the folder. It sits in my file drawer labeled Oak. Inside, there's the old valuation report, the violation notice, the judgment, and the printout of her certified letter with the paragraph highlighted. I don't go through it much. Once in a while, I take it out to show someone dealing with their own adjacent someone. I tell them to read the rules. I tell them to tape the letter to their fridge. I tell them to hire a real arborist. I tell them to flag the line and take pictures. I tell them to expect that the person who threatens the rules might be the first to break them. And I tell them that if you keep your calm and stack each page like a brick, those rules can be a wall. The funny thing is, after all of it, people still ask me if I feel sorry for her because of the money. I don't. She was given the plain version, in writing, more than once. She pushed anyway, because pushing had worked for her before. The only reason it didn't this time is that I didn't push back. I stood still and let the rule catch her. If you read this far, you're probably a read the manual person too. You get the satisfaction in doing exactly what the instruction says when the person shouting at you expects you to flail. It's a quiet kind of satisfaction, but it lasts. Every time I water the new trees and watch the stream soak the soil, I think about how a sign on a fence and a paragraph on a page were stronger than a chainsaw with a dull chain. The new trees will never be that old oak in my lifetime, but they'll be something good. In a while, some neighbor's kid will lean against their trunks for a photo. Some squirrel will carve a route across the top. Some code officer will look up and nod at a nice crown and move on. And someone else's someone will probably still complain about leaves. I just hope they read the last line this time. Anyway, thank you for watching. See you again tomorrow.